Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson, your host for Women in Business, a show that celebrates women and their accomplishments as entrepreneurs or senior managers. As a women business owner for over 5 decades, I take great pride in bringing these interviews to you. And my guest today is Suzy Prudden. Suzy is an internationally recognized expert, speaker, and coach, and is a New York Times best-selling author. She has gotten wonderful testimonials from people like Louise Hay, Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra, just the leading names in the business of great accomplishment and personal development. So I'd like to welcome Suzy to our show and say this is going to be a great interview. How are you, Suzy?
I am fabulous, and it's another one of those Chamber of Commerce days in Southern California, sunny and mild, not hot, thank goodness. And I'm great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Well, I am wonderful, and I'm in sunny southern Florida right now, but it is hot and it is muggy. So we've got the opposite of the two coasts. But, Suzy, you came from a very famous family, and you had a lot of ability to look at and observe what was going on around you. So why did you decide to go into business for yourself?
Well, when I first, it's funny, when my mother told me I was a freshman in college, and my mother told me I couldn't date the boy I was dating, so I ran away and married him, and worked for a few companies in New York City in very low-paying jobs, low-responsibility jobs, and at one point, I guess it was when was it, 63, 64? I was 22, whenever that was, 63, 62. And I had married at 19, and then I was fired from one of my jobs. And I decided at that moment I was never going to work for anybody else again, period. Because I was working for somebody else to make them money, and I wasn't making any. It was that simple. And my husband and I spent the summer in Massachusetts, where I had gone to school, and we decided to open up an art gallery. And so we did. We got paintings on consignment. Friends of ours had a guest house, like a bed and breakfast. They had a barn on their property. We turned the barn into an art gallery, and we spent the summer in the country. And when we came back to New York City, my ex-husband was in school, so he wasn't working. And I thought I could go back to working as a Gal Friday and making, $100 a week, which was insane, even then. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. And because I am the daughter of Bonnie Prudden, who was the nation's foremost fitness authority, and I grew up learning her technique. I mean, she started her business in 1947 when I was 4 years old. And this is a woman entrepreneur before there were women entrepreneurs. And I just decided to take that knowledge, because I had grown up in that environment, and start teaching exercise. And so that's what I did. I asked my mother if I could use her name, because my name was Sussman at the time, and it was not famous. And my mother said, yes, I could use her name. And so definitely I used her name. It opened many, many doors for me. And then it was up to me to stay in the room. And I was... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because, we're around the same era, you and I. And we both went into business very early. I mean, you went into business at 22. I went into business at 21. And we did it before it was fashionable to be done. But you and I are both in... a different era of our lives, and you know how committed I am to business. What keeps you committed to your business?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question, she says, stalling. I don't know what else to do. It's what else would I do? I've looked at it often, and I love what I do. And yes, I love to travel. Yes, I love to do all of the quote-unquote fun things. But more importantly for me, I love making a difference. And for me to go off and have a week or two on a cruise or in Hawaii or in Europe. That's wonderful fun, but I usually, when I'm there, find a way to turn it into work as well. Just because I love what I do. I love seeing people, because I work so closely with people in terms of helping them to achieve their goals in their personal life and their work life. It's really wonderful for me to continue that experience. I honestly don't know what I would do if I didn't do that. I write books, so I do that already. I already have I do everything I want to do.
You know, it's so funny. You could be taking a quote out of my little book, because when people say to me, well, why don't you retire? I say, to what? I mean, I do everything I want to do anyway. I go every place I want to go anyway. And
Right.
as you say, I mean, I've certainly spoken on cruise ships when I go anywhere. I mean, I've been fortunate to speak in 50 countries and 49 states. And so really, I get the best of everything. And so I totally understand what you're saying. So how has this business, or businesses, depending on how many you've had, affected your life?
Again, that's a great question. It is my life, and it always has been. When I started my business when I was 22, I mean, my focus was supporting the family. I was putting my husband through school. I was also paying for his therapy. I mean, he went to school, and so I worked, and it made it. I didn't mind, and I had a baby at that time. I figured the interesting thing, Gail, was when in 1962, when I decided that was 62, no, it was 65. When I decided I was 22, when I decided that I was going to work for myself and no one else, um, I was also going to have a baby. And I knew I couldn't work for somebody else at $100 a week from 9 to 5, because if I had a baby, I had to take care of my child. But as a teacher of exercise, I could create my own hours. And so my first company was that. It was teaching exercise. And because I am Bonnie's daughter, I was very, very, very good at it. She trained me very well. And when I started teaching exercise in New York City, there was one other exercise school in New York. When I left the business in 1983, when I sold it, that's when there were every 3 or 4 blocks you'd see, or maybe 5 blocks you'd see an exercise establishment. Now when I go back to New York to visit, there's one on every, 3 on every block. But when I started, there was only one other.
It's
And
interesting.
so,
I was thinking about that this morning. I was saying, now, Gail, what was the first time you ever went to a gym? I mean, I'd always been athletic. I'd always been a dancer. Then I was a big swimmer and water skier. But because there really weren't any gyms around. And I
oh,
think it was in 1985 that I joined my first gym. And I was thinking, because I worked out this morning already, I was thinking, golly, I ought to have an anniversary in there of how long I've been working out, because literally, I have been going to the gym practically every day, 7 days a week since 1985. But you mentioned a couple of things in there, Susie. First of all, at the time you started this and you were having a baby, there were not the child care facilities that there are now. That's number one. And number
right.
two, if you had gone to work for somebody else, nobody really would have understood if a child got sick or you couldn't come in or
No,
anything like that. At least today, there is some tolerance of that. So
yes.
what would you say, because you have been in business for yourself, and you did have a start because of your mom, what's the biggest challenge you faced?
Getting enough clients. Always getting enough clients. And it is a challenge today. It's the marketing. How do you market? Now, I was very, very blessed. And, people say, how did you become so successful? They ask me all the time, how did you do this? How did you get interviewed by this? And I was very, very blessed. I was in the right place at the right time with the right name and the right talent. And being in New York City, now I live in Los Angeles, and I say New York is a very easy city. And people are stunned. They say, well, isn't LA easy? It's so laid back. I said, well, actually, no, it's not laid back. It's a very competitive city. and it's a city where you have to actually work very hard. And for me, when I was in New York City, because of who I am and because of the timing, everything came to me. I did have my biggest challenge was, as I said, marketing. It's still the biggest challenge, and I just do it.
And that's the point. That's the point that everybody who's listening to this, I don't care what industry you're in, women, whether or not it's construction or whether it's retail or if it's online or wherever you are in business, marketing is the key. Everybody is in the marketing and sales business, and you can never forget it. You can't say in the dry cleaning business or I'm in the women's retail shop business. You are in the marketing business, and that's what it's all about. So right on, and I agree with you. I think that LA is far more competitive than New York, but that's my own personal opinion. So how has being a woman affected you or your business?
I haven't got a clue because I haven't been anything else.
I feel the same way. I just said to someone recently, I didn't know if I was being sexually harassed or not because it just never occurred to me. And I looked at people when they said something and just laughed. But it's true. I think that you either go into it and say, I know I'm going to be successful, or you go in there and you say, maybe, 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 and then it's maybe the rest of your life.
Exactly. And it's people say, well, how do you do it? I say, I just do it. I just do it. And I'm very, very spiritual. So when I have a challenge, I give it to God. And I figured God knows how to handle it better than I do. And it always turns out. Is it easy all the time? No, it's not. There are weeks when I go, okay, how are we going to get through this week? Look, I have had incredible success. I've also had phenomenal failure. 8 months after being on Oprah, I was homeless. Now, people say, how on earth did you do that? I made mistakes, brilliant mistakes. And as that occurred for me, I knew that it was probably the best thing that I could experience because it was going to change my life. And it did. And I am a much better healer, coach, speaker, person because of that experience.
You know, that's so true. People are always so afraid of failing, and there's people that I know that say, well, if you haven't failed enough, you won't be as successful as you can be because it takes a lot of failure to be able to get to where you need to be and be successful. So you've just made a very clear statement of it. But the key would be, I think, Suzy, was how you got yourself out of that situation. I think people would learn from that.
They do, and I do. When I explain it, it wasn't even it wasn't a conscious thought. How do I get out of this? What I did was every day I just kept moving forward. I went into creative mode, and so even though I was without a home, I stayed. Okay, the second day that I was out, so to speak, I spent the first night without my home at a friend's house. And the next day, I drove down to San Diego because I was still Suzy Prudden, right? And I was speaking at the Sharps Hospital at the La Jolla Hyatt. And so I spent the next 2 nights at the La Jolla Hyatt, all my expenses paid, because I was speaking there. I was the keynote speaker at a conference for Sharps Hospital. Right after that, I drove from San Diego to Tecate, Mexico, where I was spending the week at Rancho La Puerta, which is a 5-star spa in Tecate, Mexico. Now, I drove in on Saturday, not knowing where I was going the following Saturday. But by the end of the week, I had another job someplace. And then I went to Hawaii for 2 weeks where I taught a workshop, and then I visited a friend for a week. And then I always created work wherever I went, whatever I did, always ended up